Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind memory foam mattresses and oat milk lattes to visit a time when survival meant gnawing on tree bark and hoping the water didn't kill you. You blink open your eyes to the humid haze of 1607 Jamestown, Virginia, the first permanent English settlement in America, and quickly realize that permanent might be wishful thinking. The air is thick, like you're breathing through a wet blanket. Mosquitoes hum at your ears with military coordination. And breakfast? It's a bowl of gruel that tastes like sadness and possibly pond water. You're wearing wool. In Virginia. In summer. That alone should be a crime. The ground under your feet squishes with every step because, surprise, this early colony is built on a swamp. The settlers didn't pick this location for its scenic views. They chose it because it was defensible from Spanish attacks. Shame. They forgot to defend it from dysentery. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while we're time traveling together, post your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're surrounded by about 100 men and boys. No women yet. No kids. Just grizzled faces, bad haircuts, and a whole lot of complaining. You try to ask someone where the bathrooms are, and they point vaguely toward the woods. That's not a joke. Sanitation involves digging a hole and hoping the next rainstorm washes your sins away. The food situation is dire. You bite into a biscuit and nearly chip a tooth. It's more weapon than nourishment. Ship's biscuit, they call it. Basically a hockey puck made of flour and regret. You pretend to chew politely while your stomach wonders what it did to deserve this betrayal. The settlement has a flimsy wooden palisade, which is supposed to keep out any hostile forces. Problem is, they're building it slower than the local wildlife is stealing their food. One raccoon has already made off with an entire sack of cornmeal, and honestly, you're rooting for him. Inside the fort, people are dropping like flies. 1 in 5 settlers will be dead by winter. Malaria, typhoid, salt poisoning from drinking brackish river water. You name it. Historians still argue whether more died from starvation or the lack of leadership. But the truth is, either one's enough to ruin your year. There's no real farming yet. The settlers assumed the Native Americans would supply food, but relations are tense, and the occasional arrow reminds you this isn't exactly a picnic. You're told not to wander outside. The palisade without a weapon and at least 2 friends. You don't have weapons. Or friends. You stay put. You try helping build a thatched roof and end up covered in straw, blisters, and ridicule. The workday starts at dawn and goes until exhaustion. There are no weekends, no breaks, and no OSHA regulations. You earn your meager share of mush, maybe some dried peas, and if you're lucky, a slice of salt pork so tough you consider using it as shoe leather. Then there's the water. You're constantly thirsty, and everyone keeps saying, "Don't drink from the river," which is hilarious, because that's literally the only water available. The brackish, bacteria-filled James River mocks your modern sensibilities with every sip. One guy tries to filter it through his shirt. He dies 2 days later. At night, the swamp cools just enough to let the mosquitoes triple in numbers. You wrap yourself in a damp wool blanket, hoping to avoid bites and the fever they bring. You fail. Within a week, your legs are a minefield of welts. Someone suggests rubbing pig fat on your skin to keep them off. It doesn't work, but now you smell like bacon and despair. Your stomach gurgles ominously. There's a high chance you're about to experience what they delicately refer to as bloody flux. There's no doctor, just a barber surgeon who sharpens his instruments on a rock and believes in balancing humors. You pass. The colony's leader, Captain John Smith, struts around with bravado and a matching ego. He claims he was captured by Native Americans and saved by a girl named Pocahontas. Historians still argue whether that tale was real or a 17th century PR stunt. Either way, you're impressed by anyone who survives long enough here to tell any story at all. Then there's the fort gossip. Someone claims a man was executed for stealing food. Another says a settler tried to eat a leather shoe during the starving time. And the real kicker? One guy insists he saw someone chew on their dead comrade's boot for the salty flavor. You suddenly lose your appetite. Again. Rain begins to fall, which would be refreshing if it weren't also soaking your only pair of shoes and the corner of your bedroll. The mud creeps up to your ankles as you shuffle back to your shelter, which is mostly a lean-to built from whatever sticks you could find. It leaks. Everything leaks. Night comes quickly, and with it, the constant creaking of the stockade, the cries of sick men, and the gentle scratching of something that might be a rat, or something worse. You close your eyes, exhausted, itchy, and mildly traumatized, already wondering how you'll make it to morning. You wouldn't last a day in early America, you just barely survived your first. You wake up scratching. Again. Whatever bit you last night came back with friends, and while you were dreaming about indoor plumbing and bagels, the camp around you descended deeper into what can only be described as organized filth. The smell hits first. Smoke, sweat, and the faint tang of something festering. It's not even 7 a.m. and already you're gagging. You need to go to the bathroom, but let's take a moment to talk about how that works here in early America. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. You trudge through the mud to a well-worn path leading into the woods. No stalls, no toilet paper, and definitely no flushing. It's just you, the trees, and a vague sense of shame. If you're lucky, someone left a half-rotted log to sit on. If you're not, it's squatting over a shallow pit and hoping no one walks by. You return to camp, only to be greeted by the pungent aroma of chamber pots being dumped near the edge of the fort. The theory is that waste will wash away with the rain. The reality is that it seeps into the ground and eventually into the water supply because of course it does. Your mouth feels fuzzy. You go looking for a toothbrush, but guess what? Not invented yet. People here use twigs or coarse cloths, and brushing is more of a when I remember situation. Your breath could knock out a squirrel. And your teeth? Let's just say if you're over 20 and still have all of them, you're considered a dental celebrity. A grizzled settler named Thomas shows you his dental tools. It's a pair of iron pliers he keeps in a leather pouch. You ask how they sterilize it between uses. He laughs until he starts coughing. Hard. Sterilize? He wheezes. Son, you just bite down on a stick and pray. Toothaches are common. You see one man holding his jaw, tears running down his face. There's no Novocaine, no antiseptic, just Thomas and his trusty pliers. A few men hold the guy down. One holds a bottle of strong rum. It doesn't end well. You look away, but you can still hear the crunch and the scream. And then the vomiting. Probably from the pain, maybe from the smell. Later, a woman wanders through camp selling cure-alls. She offers a thick brown paste that promises to clear the humors. Ingredients? No one knows. It smells like old feet and sassafras. You pass. You try to wash. Up using a tin basin and cold water. There's soap, technically, but it's made from lye and animal fat, and feels like you're exfoliating with sandpaper dipped in bacon grease. Still, it's better than nothing. You rinse your face only to find a dead fly floating in the water. Classic. Your clothes are soaked with sweat by midday. There's no real laundry process. People just wear things until they're too stiff to bend, then beat them with sticks in the river. Underwear is optional. Deodorant doesn't exist. Everyone smells, including you. Even the elite stink. Fancy powdered wigs? Sure. But underneath those fluffy domes, scalps are teeming with lice. Everyone's constantly scratching. A man with a large gray wig tells you it's perfectly normal. He says he sprinkles flour on his head to keep the lice confused. You don't even know how to respond. Food, as always, is a gamble. Lunch today is stale bread and a stew that mostly consists of turnip water and a suspicious-looking chunk of meat. You don't ask what kind. It's better not to know. Someone says it might be possum. Someone else says it might be old. Possum. You quietly sip your broth. Historians still argue whether colonists really believed bathing could cause illness, or if it was just a practical choice in a world without hot water or privacy. Either way, the result is the same. You're dirty. They're dirty. Everyone's dirty. A rat scurries across your foot. You do a little scream, just a small one. No one even looks up. You try to help haul a barrel of fresh water from the river, which is rich considering the river hasn't been fresh since. Back at your lean-to, you try to rest. But the man next to you is coughing non-stop. Consumption, they say. Tuberculosis, we'd call it now. There's no cure, just time and fresh air, neither of which he's getting. You offer him a sip of water. He nods gratefully, then coughs directly into the cup. You slowly slide it away. It's not all doom and gloom, though. One woman nearby has fashioned a makeshift fan out of turkey feathers. She lets you borrow it for a moment. It's surprisingly effective and smells like dried herbs. She tells you she lines her shoes with mint to ward off bad spirits. Or maybe bad foot odor. Hard to tell. You spot a child, maybe 10 years old, picking bugs out of his sister's hair with a practiced hand. It's oddly tender. Gross. But sweet. Someone starts playing a fiddle. The music floats through camp like a ghost of joy. You tap your foot to the beat. Just for a moment you forget where you are. Then you hear a scream. Another tooth extraction. The moment passes. By nightfall, your skin feels gritty, your head throbs, and your back aches from lifting water barrels and dodging rats. You curl into a damp ball under your blanket, surrounded by the smell of smoke, sweat, and whatever's festering in the chamber pot zone. Sleep comes slowly. Rest doesn't. Because you're still scratching. You're startled awake by yelling, angry, panicked yelling, and for a moment, you forget where you are. Then the mosquito bite on your eyelid reminds you. Right. Colonial America. 1600s. No coffee, no electricity, and currently, no peace and quiet. You poke your head out of your lean-to to see a crowd forming near the food shed. A loaf of bread has gone moldy overnight, again, and someone's being blamed for souring the flour. You don't know how that works, and apparently neither does anyone else, but that's not stopping accusations from flying. Welcome to Puritan New England, where everything is a sin, everyone's suspicious, and literally anything out of the ordinary could get you accused of witchcraft. You were hoping for a slow morning and maybe a biscuit that didn't chip your tooth. But instead, you're now part of a spontaneous, full-blown moral panic. The woman at the center of the crowd is about 40, which around here is basically ancient. She's accused of whispering over a cauldron, likely stew, having a cat with knowing eyes, and horror of horrors, curing someone's headache with herbs. That last one especially raises eyebrows. Herbal knowledge? Might as well wear a sign that says, "Please dunk me in a pond." Historians still argue whether these trials were driven by fear, property disputes, or just good old-fashioned boredom. But one thing is clear. Logic left the building hours ago. You shuffle to the edge of the crowd, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. Your modern deodorant has worn off 3 centuries ago, so blending in won't be hard. You just hope no one asks you any questions. You sneeze. Heads turn. Oh no. One of the village elders eyes you warily. "He's new," someone whispers. "Don't know where he sleeps." Now you're sweating, which only makes you look more guilty. You back away slowly, murmuring something about gathering firewood, and disappear behind the nearest pile of chopped logs. You're safe. For now. To escape the rising tension, you volunteer to help the town baker. This, it turns out, is not better. The oven is a stone dome that holds heat like a dragon's belly, and your job is to keep the fire going while occasionally rotating loaves using a giant wooden paddle. There's no timer, no gloves, and definitely no OSHA. One moment of distraction, say, when a goat wanders in and tries to eat your sleeve, and boom, the whole batch is burned. Blackened crusts, bitter insides. The baker curses, blames you, and mutters something about unnatural clumsiness. You're pretty sure he just put you on a witch watch list. In an attempt to make yourself useful again, you offer to churn butter. This seems safe. Peaceful even. It's not. After 45 minutes of relentless arm-numbing stirring, you're rewarded with a half-formed lump and a splash of buttermilk in the eye. The wooden churn handle gives you a blister the size of a grape. The farmer's wife sighs and says, "Bless your heart," which in 17th century speak translates roughly to, "You're useless, but too pitiful to yell at." You slump beside the well, panting and sticky, only to be informed that well water must be drawn slowly or it angers the spirits. You nod, as if this makes perfect sense. A child nearby is holding a dried apple doll. It's surprisingly lifelike and deeply unsettling. She offers it to you with a gap-toothed smile. You decline gently. The doll seems to blink. Back in the town square, things have escalated. The accused woman has been taken into the meeting house, where the elders are debating her fate. Someone suggests a dunking test. Tie her to a chair, toss her into the river, and see if she floats. If she does, she's a witch. If she drowns, she's innocent. You do the math and realize there's no good outcome here. One man, possibly a local with too much free time, suggests testing her by forcing her to recite the Lord's Prayer perfectly. Any stammer, hiccup, or forgotten word. Witch. You try reciting it in your head and forget the second line. You make a mental note to speak as little as possible for the foreseeable future. Later, while fetching wood, you overhear a debate between two ministers. They argue whether the devil can appear in human form or only as a goat, a pig, or a strangely attractive traveler. You hope you don't qualify as any of those. One fringe theory being whispered is that some of the accused may have actually been suffering from ergot poisoning, a hallucinogenic mold found on rye that can cause fits, paranoia, and convulsions. Historians still debate whether this explains some of the more bizarre outbursts recorded during the witch trials. Either way, it's one more reason to avoid the bread. The sun sets, casting the town in a flickering glow of candlelight and paranoia. You're invited, more like commanded, to attend the evening sermon. Church isn't optional here, and it isn't short. You sit for hours on a hard bench, knees to chest, while a man in a wide-brimmed hat bellows about eternal damnation, the wrath of God, and the temptation of idle hands. You are extremely aware of your idle hands. A baby cries. A dog barks. The preacher slams his fist and declares both evidence of Satan's disruption. You clutch your knees tighter. You're finally released just in time to find your meager supper. Cold porridge and a slice of dried apple. You eat slowly, chewing the apple for nearly a minute before you realize it's partly fermented. You pretend that's a feature, not a flaw. Back in your corner of the barn, because you've been downgraded from the lean-to, you settle in on a pile of scratchy hay. It stabs through your shirt in 5 different places. You itch. You scratch. You sigh. In the distance, a woman screams again. You try not to think about it. The doll is watching you from a corner. You close your eyes, hoping morning will come quickly. But sleep is slow, heavy, and haunted by thoughts of burned bread and dunking stools. You probably wouldn't last a day in early America. You've lasted 3. Congratulations. Now you're just historically miserable. You wake to the sound of someone sharpening a knife. Not ominous at all. Just the blacksmith, probably. Or the tanner. Or someone getting ready to remove a musket. Ball without anesthesia. Either way, it's a reminder. Welcome back to early America, where everything is sharp, rusty, and probably unwashed. Today, you've been voluntold to help the town's blacksmith. He's a burly man named Elias with soot permanently embedded into every crevice of his face. His beard looks like it once caught fire and decided to stay that way. He grunts at you, gestures to the forge, and thrusts a heavy set of tongs into your hands. "Hold this," he says. "You don't know what this is, but it's glowing orange and hissing like a furious snake." The forge is unbearably hot. Your face feels like it's melting and you can't stop blinking. Your eyes sting from the smoke, and your arms shake under the weight of an iron rod that probably doubles as a battering ram in emergencies. Elias shouts instructions, none of which make sense to you. "Strike with purpose," he yells, while you delicately tap the iron like it's going to bite. Eventually, you hit it too hard, at the wrong angle, and send sparks flying onto your shoe. You dance around, swatting at your foot while Elias laughs and mutters something about city hands. You're starting to suspect this might be punishment for failing at butter. While blacksmithing is all grunts and sweat, the tannery next door is a whole different kind of nightmare. You volunteer, briefly, to help stretch hides. Within 30 seconds, your nose regrets it. The stench is, how do we say this gently? It's like someone boiled old boots, swamp water, and regret. You learn that tanning involves soaking animal skins in a mixture of water, lime, and, you're going to love this, rotting animal brains. Yes, brains. Apparently, the enzymes help soften the leather. Who discovered that? No one knows. Historians still argue whether indigenous people taught settlers this method, or if some desperate European just got weird with a deer. You try to hold your breath, but you end up gagging instead. The tanner hands you a scraping tool and points at a half-cleaned hide. The texture is like sticky felt, and every stroke releases a new. Next, you're sent to assist in making candles. Sounds innocent, right? Wrong. The process involves rendering animal fat, usually beef or mutton sweet, over an open flame until it becomes liquid enough to dip a wick. That's it. That's the whole method. Dip. Cool. Dip again. Cool again. Over and over until you have what looks vaguely like a waxy carrot. But the smell? Oh, it's unforgettable. Hot fat smells exactly like you'd expect, especially when it's been sitting in the sun all morning. Your hands are greasy. Your clothes are flecked with congealed tallow, and at one point, you spill a ladle of melted fat on your foot. You now have a candle-shaped blister. Congratulations. During a brief break, you wander toward a group of children playing Graces, a game involving hoops and sticks. One kid, barefoot and nose-running, offers to teach you. You try to smile, but you're still recovering from fat foot. Still, for a minute, it's almost pleasant. The kids laugh. You manage to catch a hoop. Maybe you're getting the hang of this. Then a boy runs by screaming that someone's cow just gave birth upside down. You don't want to know what that means, but people sprint toward the pasture like it's the colonial version of a celebrity sighting. You're told to fetch water. Again. This time from a stream farther out. You follow a narrow trail into the woods, alone, bucket in hand. The trees are thick, the air damp, You hear rustling. Probably a squirrel. Probably. Suddenly, a rusted trap snaps shut just ahead of you. Your heart tries to escape through your chest. You didn't even see it. You now walk 10 times slower, scanning every inch of ground like it's a minefield. Traps were common for catching game, and sometimes accidentally catching kids. You remind yourself to walk loudly and avoid anything that looks suspiciously well-trodden. You make it to the stream, which looks beautiful until you realize a dead raccoon is bobbing just upstream. You scoop from the opposite bank and hope no one notices the aftertaste. Back in the village, you pass by a midwife's cottage. A woman inside is in labor, her screams spilling out through the open window. Childbirth in early America? Brutal. There's no epidural, no sterile tools, and definitely no ice chips. Just boiled water, herbal poultices, and whispered prayers. The midwife looks about 25 and dead-eyed from trauma. You keep walking. Someone stops you to help chop wood. You think, sure, how hard can it be? The axe is dull, the log won't split, and after 5 swings your hands are covered in blisters. A farmer passing by shakes his head. City hands, he mutters, same as Elias. You're starting to develop a complex. As you sit down to rest on a stump, you notice your clothes are stiff with sweat and grime. Your socks, if you can call them that, are more whole than fabric. Your shoes, thin leather with no support, have rubbed raw patches on both heels. There are no band-aids, just cloth strips dipped in vinegar. You wrap your feet and try not to cry. By evening, you return to the blacksmith to say you didn't die. He grunts and hands you a crude horseshoe. Crooked, but solid, he says. You beam like he gave you a diploma. Dinner is stew again, this time thicker, saltier, and somehow grayer. You ask what's in it. Someone replies, Tuesday's chicken. You do not follow up. That night, the wind howls through the gaps in the barn walls. The candle you made earlier sputters in the corner, casting shaky shadows. You curl up, sore, stinking, and wondering if you're officially a colonist now, or just still the weird new guy who keeps gagging at the tannery. You scratch your foot. It might be fleas this time. You wake up with your mouth tasting like old stew and your arm asleep under a pile of straw. As you groggily sit up, a splinter finds its way into your palm. Perfect. It's another lovely day in colonial America, where everything hurts, smells odd, and might accuse you of being in league with Satan. Today, the town's holding a muster drill, basically a community-wide let's pretend we're soldiers event, just in case local tribes, rival colonists, or bears with a vendetta decide to attack. You're handed a musket. It's taller than you, heavier than you expected, and feels wildly unsafe. The barrel is slightly warped, the powder smells like death, and you're told not to worry if it misfires, because that's just what they do. You're lined up with the other able-bodied men, all of whom look like they've been awake since. The womb. The captain, whose hat is far too large for his head, barks orders with all the enthusiasm of someone pretending this matters. You try to look serious, but your musket's trigger is wiggling like a loose tooth. That can't be good. You practice marching first. Left foot, right foot. Sounds easy, right? But when half the group is missing toes from frostbite and farming accidents, rhythm isn't exactly the strong suit. Someone trips. The guy next to you sneezes into his gunpowder pouch, and suddenly the whole column's a mess of coughing and curses. Then comes the firing practice. You go through the sacred multi-step ritual of loading your weapon. Powder, wad, ball, ram it all down, hope the flint strikes, and try not to flinch. When you finally pull the trigger, your musket lets out a sad little pft and a puff of smoke. No bang, no recoil, just disappointment. The captain scowls at you like you personally failed liberty. Historians still argue whether these drills were effective or just theatrical, but it's clear that if you were relying on this militia to defend anything important, you'd be in big trouble. After drill, you're dragged into militia chores, which are basically all the same chores you were doing before. Hauling wood, mending tools, digging ditches. Just now with the honor of doing it in someone's old military jacket that smells like wet sheep. You are not feeling particularly patriotic. Someone hands you a worn-out shovel and points to a ditch. You ask, "What's the ditch for?" And they say, "Drainage." You ask, "From what?" And they shrug. You dig anyway. The soil is heavy, clumped with rocks and roots. You throw out your back approximately 8 times. At one point you think you see a worm. It's not. It's a piece of rope. You are too tired to be disappointed. Later, you're taken to the powder house, a small stone building where the town stores its gunpowder, bullets, and general sense of unease. It's cool inside, which is nice, but also terrifying because you're now standing in what is essentially a giant, highly flammable tomb. One spark, one accident, and you'd be launched into orbit over Massachusetts. One of the older boys dares you to light a candle inside. You refuse, of course, because you enjoy having limbs. He calls you a coward. You say, "Correct." He doesn't have a comeback for that. At noon, the town bell rings and everyone gathers for a public reading of the laws. It's exactly as thrilling as it sounds. A man in a large collar reads from a worn scroll about regulations for trade, Sabbath violations, and punishments for swearing, idleness, and unseemly merriment. That last one gets a few guilty chuckles, which are immediately followed by glares. You learn that penalties include stocks, fines, and, for repeat offenders, a public shaming with signs like, "I am a scandalous gossip." You mentally file that away under potential future problems. Back in the square, a man is being placed in the stocks for stealing a spoon. He looks both embarrassed and slightly relieved to be sitting down. Children run by and toss breadcrumbs at him like he's a bird. He shrugs, feeling charitable, and avoiding more ditch work. You offer to help repair the town fence. It's mostly upright, except where it isn't. You hammer crooked nails into warped wood using a rock because someone took the mallet to use as a stool. A goat escapes through one of the unrepaired sections and is chased down by 3 yelling teenagers, one of whom trips into a puddle that might have been a pig bath yesterday. You finally break for dinner, dried corn mush and a strip of jerky that could be repurposed as roofing material. As you chew, A man next to you talks about the Indian threat in ominous tones. The mood shifts. You try to change the subject and ask what day it is. No one knows for sure. Probably Thursday. As the sun lowers, the town practices a night watch. You're given a lantern, a stick, and instructions to patrol quietly. You wonder what, exactly, you're supposed to do if danger shows up. Glare at it sternly. You trudge along the perimeter, trying not to fall into any more drainage ditches. At one point, a shadow moves near the tree line. You freeze. It moves. Again. You raise your stick. And then, it's just that goat again. The teens gave up. It's wild now. Probably planning a coup. By midnight, you're deliriously tired. Your hands are blistered, your feet are wet, and your back is permanently arched like a worn-out ox. You return to the barn, where the straw somehow feels even itchier than last night. You swear it moves. Possibly bugs. Probably bugs. As you lie there, staring at the ceiling, you realize something. You survived the day. A full day of weapons, ditches, and goat-based crises. That's almost impressive. Still, you can't help but think. Early America is like a very difficult video game. No tutorials, terrible loot, and every NPC is trying to burn you as a witch. And tomorrow? Tomorrow is laundry day. But not the kind you're used to. Oh no. It involves lye soap, a washboard, and an aching certainty that your knuckles may never recover. But for now, you sleep. Morning creeps in. Cold and relentless, sliding through the cracks in the barn walls like an unwelcome guest. You wake to the distinct aroma of wet wool and disappointment. Today's mission? Laundry. Early American style. You might imagine, laundry is a casual wash and hang affair, but no. You're about to embark on a grueling, multi-hour ordeal involving a giant pot, boiling water, lye soap, an ingredient that sounds more like a medieval torture device than a cleaning agent, and a wooden washboard designed by someone who hated palms. First, you haul a massive iron kettle over a fire and fill it with creek water. The cold makes your fingers numb and your breath visible as puffs of desperation. Next, you carefully stir in lye soap, watching the water turn into something that looks suspiciously like poison. You're told it'll cut through grease and grime, which, if you recall, is currently caked into your every pore. You grab a bundle of clothes, mostly heavy linen and wool, none of it fresh, and start scrubbing. The washboard's ridges scrape your hands raw, and the fabric resists your efforts like a stubborn mule. You swear you hear the clothes laughing, probably the lice. While you work, you overhear a debate between two women nearby. They argue about the best way to dry clothes in this damp climate. One swears by hanging garments over the fireplace. The other insists that the smoke gives them character. Historians still argue whether the smoke drying tradition was practical or just a side effect of poor weather. But either way, you're not volunteering to be the guinea pig for character. After hours of labor, your hands look like they've been through a cheese grater. Your arms ache, and your back protests with a vengeance. You dip a shirt one last time and hold it up. It's cleaner than before, sure, but it's also stiff, scratchy, and smells faintly of burnt soap and regret. Your clothes join a line of garments hung awkwardly on a shaky wooden frame. The wind picks up, and a sudden gust sends shirts and breeches snapping like flags in a storm. You hold on to your shirt like it's a lifeline. During a brief respite, a child shows you a handful of washerwomen's helper herbs, something called soapwort. You sniff it, and it smells like a wildflower meadow. Apparently, soapwort was a gentler alternative to lye soap. Historians still debate how widespread its use was, but you're all for anything that doesn't burn your skin. Your break is cut short when a neighbor asks if you can help churn butter again. You groan inwardly but agree, mostly because sitting still isn't an option here. This time, your technique improves, mostly because the woman guiding you yells less and shows more patience. You notice her hands are rough, but her smile is kind. She jokes that butter churning is good for the soul, which sounds like a lie. When you finally produce a lump of butter, it's uneven and a bit salty, but it's real. You hold it triumphantly, wondering if this counts as a culinary achievement. By late afternoon, you're summoned to the apothecary. This place smells like dried herbs, old wood, and just a hint of something vaguely medicinal. The apothecary is an older man with thick glasses and a mustache that looks like it might conceal secret potions. He shows you a jar filled with crushed dried toads. Yes, toads. And explains their use in treating everything from warts to the evil eye. You feel a little lightheaded just looking at the jar. Apparently, some remedies also involve mercury and arsenic, which you're pretty sure the modern world frowns upon. You ask about the strangest remedy he's seen, and he chuckles. Once had a woman insist on wearing a hat made of weasel fur to ward off headaches. We still argue if it worked, or just scared the pain away. You nod politely, trying not to imagine weasels running rampant through the village. After your apothecary visit, you help prepare a herbal poultice for a man with a sprained ankle. The mixture smells like vinegar and dirt. He winces as you apply it, but thanks you, grimacing. As evening falls, the town gathers for a communal meal. The food is simple, but hearty. Stew, bread, and a wild onion salad that's a bit too pungent for your liking. You notice the flicker of candlelight in everyone's eyes, a shared exhaustion and quiet resilience. Someone tells a story about a recent thunderstorm that knocked down half the corn crop. Another talks about a neighbor who lost a finger to a runaway ox. You sip your broth, thinking about the countless challenges tucked behind every small victory here. After dinner, you help clean up, sweeping the dirt floor with a broom made of twigs. You find a spider's web tangled in the corner, and consider relocating it, then decide it's probably earned its place. Back in your barn corner, you feel a rare moment of calm. The day's labor weighs heavy, but there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing you contributed, however clumsily. You lie down, muscles sore but heart a bit lighter. Outside, the wind whispers through the trees, carrying hints of smoke and pine. The doll from earlier, still sitting in the corner, seems less menacing now. Or maybe you're just too tired to care. You close your eyes, letting the ache settle in, the distant laughter and chatter lulling you towards sleep. Tomorrow? You hear? There's a town meeting. That means decisions, debates, and more people telling you what to do. But for now, the world feels still. And you survived another day. Morning creeps in, cold and relentless, sliding through the cracks in the barn walls like an unwelcome guest. You wake to the distinct aroma of wet wool and disappointment. Today's mission? Laundry. Early American style. You might imagine laundry as a casual wash and hang affair, but no. You're about to embark on a grueling multi-hour ordeal involving a giant pot, boiling water, lye soap, an ingredient that sounds more like a medieval torture device than a cleaning agent, and a wooden washboard designed by someone who hated palms. First, you haul a massive iron kettle over a fire and fill it with creek water. The cold makes your fingers numb and your breath visible as puffs of desperation. Next, you carefully stir in lye soap, watching the water turn into something that looks suspiciously like poison. You're told it'll cut through grease and grime, which, if you recall, is currently caked into your every pore. You grab a bundle of clothes, mostly heavy linen and wool, none of it fresh, and start scrubbing. The washboard's ridges scrape your hands raw, and the fabric resists your efforts like a stubborn mule. You swear you hear the clothes laughing, probably the lice. While you work, you overhear a debate between two women nearby. They argue about the best way to dry clothes in this damp climate. One swears by hanging garments over the fireplace. The other insists that the smoke gives them character. Historians still argue whether the smoke drying tradition was practical or just a side effect of poor weather. But either way, you're not volunteering to be the guinea pig for character. After hours of labor, your hands look like they've been through a cheese grater. Your arms ache, and your back protests with a vengeance. You dip a shirt one last time and hold it up. It's cleaner than before, sure, but it's also stiff, scratchy, and smells faintly of burnt soap and regret. Your clothes join a line of garments hung awkwardly on a shaky wooden frame. The wind picks up, and a sudden gust sends shirts and breeches snapping like flags in a storm. You hold on to your shirt like it's a lifeline. During a brief respite, a child shows you a handful of washerwomen's helper herbs, something called soapwort. You sniff it, and it smells like a wildflower meadow. Apparently, soapwort was a gentler alternative to lye soap. Historians still debate how widespread its use was, but you're all for anything that doesn't burn your skin. Your break is cut short when a neighbor asks if you can help churn butter again. You groan inwardly but agree, mostly because sitting still isn't an option here. This time, your technique improves. Mostly because the woman guiding you yells less and shows more patience. You notice her hands are rough, but her smile is kind. She jokes that butter churning is good for the soul, which sounds like a lie. When you finally produce a lump of butter, it's uneven and a bit salty, but it's real. You hold it triumphantly, wondering if this counts as a culinary achievement. By late afternoon, you're summoned to the apothecary. This place smells like dried herbs, old wood, and just a hint of something vaguely medicinal. The apothecary, is an older man with thick glasses and a mustache that looks like it might conceal secret potions. He shows you a jar filled with crushed, dried toads. Yes, toads. And explains their use in treating everything from warts to the evil eye. You feel a little lightheaded just looking at the jar. Apparently, some remedies also involve mercury and arsenic, which you're pretty sure the modern world frowns upon. You ask about the strangest remedy he's seen, and he chuckles. Once had a woman insist on wearing a hat made of weasel fur to ward off headaches. We still argue if it worked, or just scared the pain away. You nod politely, trying not to imagine weasels running rampant through the village. After your apothecary visit, as evening falls, the town gathers for a communal meal. The food is simple but hearty: stew, bread, and a wild onion salad that's a bit too pungent for your liking. You notice the flicker of candlelight in everyone's eyes, a shared exhaustion, and quiet resilience. Someone tells a story about a recent thunderstorm that knocked down half the corn crop. Another talks about a neighbor who lost a finger to a runaway ox. You sip your broth, thinking about the countless challenges tucked behind every small victory here. After dinner, you help clean up, sweeping the dirt floor with a broom made of twigs. You find a spider's web tangled in the corner and consider relocating it, then decide it's probably earned its place. Back in your barn corner, you feel a rare moment of calm. The day's labor weighs heavy, but there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing you contributed, however clumsily. You lie down, muscles sore, but heart a bit lighter. Outside, the wind whispers through the trees, carrying hints of smoke and pine. The doll from earlier, still sitting in the corner, seems less menacing now. Or maybe you're just too tired to care. You close your eyes, letting the ache settle in, the distant laughter and chatter lulling you towards sleep. Tomorrow, you hear, there's a town meeting. That means decisions, debates, and more people telling you what to do. But for now, the world feels still, and you survived another day. You awake to a dawn mist hanging thick over the village, the kind that clings to your clothes and refuses to let go. The morning air is damp, cold, and carries the scent of wood smoke, mixed with something you swear is rotten cabbage, probably the tannery again. Your joints protest the promise of another day filled with tasks nobody really wants, but everyone must do. Today is the day of the town meeting, a social event that feels like a mix between a noisy courtroom and an awkward family reunion. The whole village congregates in the meeting house, a plain wooden building smelling faintly of pine and old sweat. The air inside is thick with anticipation, or maybe just dust. At the front, the town clerk, who's memorized half the town's grudges, begins reading the agenda. You learn that the main topics include road repairs, a proposal to increase taxes for the local militia, and a heated debate about whether to allow Sunday trading, a big no-no according to Puritan law, but a tempting prospect for the merchants. The Yash meeting quickly devolves into a series of arguments, some polite, others less so. One farmer complains about his neighbors letting their pigs roam free, rooting up his garden. Another accuses the town blacksmith of overcharging for horseshoes. You can tell the meeting will last until the cows come home, although hopefully, not literally. You try to pay attention, but your mind drifts to the mysterious disappearance of the town's communal rooster, which some whisper was stolen by a rival settlement. The rooster was apparently the only one brave enough to crow before dawn and keep the village on schedule. Without it, mornings have been strangely chaotic. As the debate rages, a few children sneak outside and start a game of tag, shrieking and running over the muddy ground. The contrast between their carefree energy and the adults' stern faces is striking. Historians still argue whether these town meetings actually fostered democratic spirit, or mostly served as a way to air petty grievances while maintaining the social order. Either way, you're grateful you're not the one expected to speak in front of the crowd. When the meeting finally adjourns, hours later, you feel drained. But the sun has broken through the clouds, casting warm light on the battered wooden benches and the faces of your fellow villagers, who are now relaxed and joking despite the earlier tensions. Outside, the merchants set up small stalls, selling everything from dried herbs to handmade candles. The air fills with the mingling scents of cinnamon, pine, and smoked meat. You decide to browse, eyeing a small pouch of something called snake oil. The seller swears it cures everything from headaches to bad dreams. You consider buying it just to see if it works, or at least to have a funny story. Later, you're pulled into a demonstration of colonial games, mostly a mix of simple contests like tug-of-war and hoop rolling. You join reluctantly and manage to keep up longer than expected, though your feet slip on the muddy ground more than once. A local elder tells a story about the first settlers' arrival, describing their exhaustion and the harsh winters that tested their resolve. You listen, imagining the frostbite, the hunger, and the constant struggle just to survive. It makes your own aches seem small in comparison. As evening falls, you wander back toward the blacksmith's forge. Elias is there, working quietly, his face illuminated by the glow of the fire. He nods at you, a silent acknowledgement of the day's shared hardships. You feel a strange kinship with these people. Gritty, resilient, imperfect, and endlessly stubborn. The past may be tough, but it's alive in their stories, their struggles, and even their mistakes. You settle down once again, the scent of burning coal and pine mingling in your senses. The day's noise fades into a soft hum, and your eyelids grow heavy. Tomorrow promises more chores, more surprises, and maybe, just maybe, a moment of peace. But for now, you breathe deep, sink into the straw, and let the early American night wrap around you like a rough wool blanket. You wake again to a slightly different sound today. Not the usual rooster's crow, which is still mysteriously absent, but a persistent clacking from the blacksmith's hammer. The rhythm is hypnotic, like a heartbeat for the whole town, and somehow it makes you feel connected, grounded. Your hands are still rough from yesterday's laundry and butter churning, but today calls for a different kind of labor. Repairing, tools. The village depends on rusty nails, splintered handles, and whatever scraps the blacksmith can forge together. So you find yourself sitting at his side, watching sparks fly and listening to his stories. Elias, the blacksmith, is a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks and a beard that could hide small animals. He's been working since before dawn, forging horseshoes, nails, and once even a delicate chain for a lady's bonnet. He chuckles when you ask about that one, saying, "Ladies have their whims, but the iron won't bend for them." As you hand him battered tools, you notice a peculiar thing. A handful of old horseshoes nailed upside down on the barn wall. The blacksmith swears they bring good luck, a belief carried over from old world superstitions. You raise an eyebrow, wondering if you should try it on your luck with the goat coup. Historians still argue whether these folk beliefs were deeply held or more of a cultural habit. But either way, they certainly add color to an otherwise gray day. Elias begins teaching you how to file down the edges of an axe head without losing a finger. You realize this is more delicate work than you imagined. The axe must be sharp, but not too sharp, balanced but not brittle, or else you're looking at a very bad time chopping wood. Halfway through, a sudden shout breaks your focus. A boy has accidentally dropped a horseshoe into the fire, and everyone scrambles to fish it out before it melts into a useless lump. The blacksmith shakes his head, muttering something about wasting good iron that sounds like a curse. As the afternoon sun climbs higher, you take a break and watch the other villagers bustling about. Women gather by the well, gossiping and exchanging news. Men repair fences, haul wood, or tend to animals. The children, now free from schoolwork, dart around like restless squirrels. You overhear a debate over the best way to build a chimney that won't smoke the entire house out. The suggestions range from build it taller to sacrifice a chicken, which you suspect is less practical. Back at the forge, the blacksmith hands you a freshly made nail and challenges you to drive it straight into a post. Your first attempt bends the nail at a sad angle, but by the third try, you get it mostly straight. Elias grins approvingly and tells you that good nails hold the world together. By late afternoon, you're sweaty, dirty, and smelling distinctly of smoke and metal. Elias offers you a sip of water from his flask, which tastes like cool relief after a hard day's work. As you pack up tools, the blacksmith mentions that next week, the town might host a traveling peddler, a rare event that brings strange goods, exotic spices, and a few whispers of faraway places. You imagine what it must be like to see a world beyond the village borders. That night, as you crawl back into the barn, your muscles aching in new ways, you find yourself strangely content. Despite the harshness, the endless chores, and the stubbornness of old traditions, there's something reassuring about these routines. They connect you to the past, to the people who lived, laughed, and struggled. The day closes with a communal meal, simple fare of bread, cheese, and cider. The conversations are quieter now, more reflective. You feel the slow pulse of a community bound not just by geography but by shared beliefs and struggles. As twilight dims the sky, you walk home beneath a canopy of stars. the quiet hum of crickets blending with the distant church bell. The solemnity of the day lingers, a reminder that in this harsh world, faith offers both comfort and control. You settle in for the night, your thoughts heavy, but your heart quietly steady, ready to face whatever tomorrow holds. The morning sun peeks through your window, casting long shadows over the village as you prepare for a journey you didn't expect. A trip to the local market day. Unlike the quiet daily trade, Market Day is a bustling event where the whole region converges, turning the sleepy town into a kaleidoscope of colors, sounds, and smells. You trudge through the muddy streets, past rows of stalls draped in canvas, awnings where merchants hawk their wares, bolts of fabric, shiny metal tools, jars of honey, and barrels of salted pork. The air is thick with the mingling scents of roasting meat, fresh herbs, and the unmistakable aroma of strong cider. You spot a vendor with strange, shiny fruits you've never seen before, perhaps brought by a traveling trader from the Caribbean, or beyond. You try one, biting into its crisp flesh, the sweet tart flavor surprising your taste buds. The market is a rare window into a world far beyond the village. Nearby, a woman hawks homemade soap made with goat's milk and lavender, boasting, "It can soothe skin irritated by the harsh work of the fields and the tannery." You wonder if it's true or just another sales pitch. But the idea of pampering your rough hands is tempting. Historians still argue whether market days were more about commerce or social spectacle, but either way, the event offers a vibrant break from the monotonous grind. You weave through crowds gathered to watch performances, a juggler tossing flaming torches, a fiddler playing lively tunes, and a storyteller recounting legends of Native American tribes and early settlers. You catch yourself tapping your foot, caught up in the moment. A group of children chase a small piglet, squealing as it darts through the legs of passers-by. You chuckle, remembering how chaos seems to follow these creatures wherever they go. Much like your own life here. At one stall, a grizzled old man sells miracle cures, herbs and potions claiming to fix everything from colds to broken hearts. You're skeptical but intrigued by the confidence with which he touts his wares. As the day wears on, you barter for a small bag of spices, a precious luxury here, and trade stories with a fellow traveler who's passing through on their way westward, dreaming of new lands and fortunes. The market day's energy is infectious, a brief reminder that beyond the hard labor and the routines, the world is full of surprises and possibilities. As the sun sets, you carry your meager purchases home, the vibrant memories of the day swirling with the promise of change. You fall asleep with the distant sounds of music and laughter fading into the night, grateful for this rare glimpse beyond the daily grind. The dawn creeps in softly, and you find yourself at the village schoolhouse, a tiny one-room building where children of all ages cram together under the watchful eye of a stern schoolmaster. Today, you're tasked with observing this institution, a rare glimpse into early American education, which is about as cozy as sitting on a pile of rocks. The walls are bare except for a crude alphabet chart and a few faded religious verses. The smell is a mix of chalk dust, damp wood, and the faint aroma of boiled cabbage from last night's dinner. Lingering as an olfactory ghost, you sit on a hard wooden bench, trying to ignore the itching splinters as the schoolmaster begins the day with a loud, repetitive chant of the alphabet. Kids recite their lessons in unison, their voices cracking and sometimes breaking into giggles when someone flubs a line. You notice a boy rubbing his sore eyes, rumored to have gotten a bit too much moonlight the night before. Yes, even in early America, gossip was alive and well. Education here is harsh, with corporal punishment and ever-present threat. The dreaded birch rod lies ominously on the teacher's desk, and you can almost feel its impending sting whenever a mistake is made. Historians still argue whether this strict discipline helped children learn or just instilled fear and resentment. But either way, it's clear the goal was survival through literacy and religious instruction. You overhear whispered debates among the parents outside after school about whether girls should learn to read at all, with opinions ranging from absolutely, so they can read the Bible, to better to stick to cooking and sewing. The struggle over education's role is alive even here. One of the older boys proudly shows you a book he's copied by hand. A thick, dusty tome filled with moral lessons, prayers, and historical tales. The handwriting is uneven but earnest, a testament to the effort required. The school day drags on, punctuated by the occasional sharp silence and the scrape of chalk on the blackboard. Despite the hardships, you glimpse the children's curiosity shining through, a spark that promises more than just survival. At the end of the day, you join the kids outside, their laughter ringing clear as they chase each other through the muddy yard, the birch rod forgotten for a moment. Walking home, you think about how education here is both a tool of empowerment and control, a delicate balance that shapes the future of this new land. You fall asleep contemplating the lessons learned, not just from books, but from the harsh realities etched into every child's day. The morning mist clings stubbornly to the fields as you prepare to witness one of the most vital yet overlooked aspects of early American life: food preservation. Without refrigerators or supermarkets, the villagers must employ ingenious, often smelly methods to make their hard-won harvests last through the brutal winters. You join the women gathered around a large wooden table piled high with fruits, vegetables, and slabs of salted meat. The air is thick with the tang of vinegar, smoke, and a hint of mold, an aroma that somehow signals survival rather than decay. Today's task is pickling and curing. You watch as cucumbers are sliced and packed into barrels filled with brine, the salty water bubbling and sending a satisfying fizz into the chilly air. The women talk while they work. Nearby, slabs of pork are being rubbed with salt and herbs, then hung over smoke fires to cure. The process takes weeks, but the result is prized bacon and ham that could last months. The pungent smell is strong, but strangely comforting in this rugged place. Historians still argue whether early colonists' preservation techniques were sufficient, or if many food stores simply spoiled, leading to the famines and scarcities often mentioned in colonial diaries. Either way, these smelly, salty processes were their lifeline. You try your hand at packing cabbage for sauerkraut, smashing it into a barrel until the juice rises. It's sticky and cold, and your fingers ache from the work. But you can already imagine the tangy taste to come. The conversation drifts to the challenges of winter. Everyone worries about how long their stores will last, and rumors circulate of neighbors turning desperate, resorting to eating dogs or even rats in times of famine. A grim reminder you'd rather not dwell on. As the day wears on, you help. Hang herbs to dry, their scent a pleasant contrast to the more pungent smells. Lavender, thyme, and sage promise small comforts amid the hard life. By evening, you're covered in salt and sweat, your hands cracked but proud. You join the family at supper, where pickled vegetables and smoked meat dominate the humble meal. As you lay down to sleep, your mind is filled with the smell of brine and smoke, and a deep respect for the gritty ingenuity that keeps people alive. Touch or no, past might smell bad, but it sure knew how to save a meal. The early morning sun filters softly through your window, casting a warm glow over the village as you prepare for one final immersion. The town meeting, a gathering that shapes the community's future, a forum of voices both loud and quiet. You step into the modest meeting house, where the air hums with anticipation and the scent of aged wood and ink-stained papers lingers. The room is packed with townsfolk, farmers, tradesmen, women, and even a few curious children. The town clerk calls the meeting to order, his voice steady but tired from the weight of responsibility. Today, you listen as neighbors debate everything from road repairs to land disputes, from taxes to the unpredictable weather that can make or break their year. You watch as the town's selectmen, a group of self-appointed leaders, navigate the choppy waters of communal decision-making. Their speeches mix practical concerns with a surprising amount of theatrical flair. One man argues passionately for better defenses against potential threats, citing recent tales of raids and wild animals, while another urges caution, worried about the cost and disruption. Historians still argue whether these meetings were genuinely democratic or dominated by local elites, but today, you see a messy but earnest attempt at community governance. The meeting is punctuated by sharp exchanges, sudden laughter, and the occasional dramatic pause that leaves the room hanging on a single word. You notice how the social dynamics play out. Some voices rise above others, while quieter folks nod along, perhaps wary of speaking up. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the window panes as a storm threatens. Inside, a young woman stands to propose a new schoolhouse, one that might finally provide better education for the village children, especially the girls. The idea sparks heated debate, reflecting deep divisions over tradition and progress. As the meeting draws to a close, the community agrees on several small but meaningful actions, a patchwork of compromise and hope. The clerk's gavel falls, and the crowd begins to disperse, their conversations spilling out into the cooling evening air. You linger for a moment, soaking in the sense of belonging and struggle, the messy yet vital pulse of early American life. Walking home. The first drops of rain begin to fall, soft and steady, washing the dust from the streets. You think about the many layers of this place, the work, the faith, the food, the governance, that together form a fragile but enduring tapestry. Tonight, you rest knowing that the past wasn't neat or easy, but it was real, raw, and filled with people just trying to get by. As you settle into your bed, the rain's gentle patter lulls you deeper, and the voices of the day fade into a peaceful hush. You drift off with a smile, ready to dream of a world both harsh and hopeful. The day has come to a close, and as you lay there, the weight of early America's harsh realities and stubborn hopes begins to settle softly like a blanket. Imagine the chill of the dawn air slipping through cracks in wooden walls, the sharp tang of leather and smoke mingling with the sweetness of fresh bread and cider. The constant hum of work, plowing fields, tending fires, scraping hides, blends with the quieter rhythms of faith, governance, and community. Life here was a series of small battles against weather, hunger, and uncertainty. But it was also a world brimming with resourcefulness, rituals, and moments of unexpected joy. The laughter of children chasing a runaway piglet, the shared warmth of a flickering fire, the solemnity of a Sunday sermon. All these echo softly as your mind unwinds. Now, as your breathing slows and the edges of the day blur, know that while you might not last a day in early America, you've spent these moments walking alongside those who did. You've felt their struggles, their hopes, and their humanity.